popped like tiny fireworks as the fryer sighed itself to sleep. I shut it down, slid the metal basket into place, and wiped the counter with slow circles that hurt all the way up my forearms. The clock above the soda machine blinked 12:01 a.m. in tired red. My hair smelled like oil and pepper. My shoes held the day the way a sponge holds dishwater. "Night, Margaret," called Darius from the back, breaking down boxes with a knee and a thud. "You good getting home?" "I've been getting home since before you were born," I said, and managed a smile. He laughed and shook his head. "You're a machine." He meant it kindly. I still wished it didn't have to be true. I washed my hands twice, but the smell lived in the skin. My reflection in the chrome of the warmer looked like fog. White hair pinned flat, dark uniform, name tag straight as a prayer. I tugged my cardigan from the hook and felt how the cuffs were turning shiny from rubbing against trays. No one ever tells you work can sand you smooth. Outside, the night was wet enough to catch the streetlights. I took the last bus, the kind where you know every face by habit. A nurse with heavy eyelids, a kid whose headphones leaked ghosts of music, a man asleep with his chin on his chest and his hands around a brown paper bag like a baby bird. The driver hummed Old Soul and kept the heat too high. I counted the stops without looking. The bus sighed at mine, and I stepped down careful because my knees complained when I surprised them. The house looked the same as it always did in the dark. Our porch light burned yellow, the one my husband insisted on installing himself when he said, "We'll always keep a light on for family." He meant it then. I held the rail and climbed the 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. Slow as I had the night he died. Only I didn't cry on the 3rd one anymore. The door opened onto the glow of the television. Laughter from a show I didn't know swam through the living room. Lily was spread out on the couch, blanket thrown over one leg, phone alight in her hand. She didn't look up. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, and turned toward the kitchen, because the kettle sounded like forgiveness at the end of a shift. "Don't sit on the couch," Lily said, her eyes still on the screen. "You'll make it smell." The words fell in the room like a dropped plate. Everyone pretends they didn't hear. I stopped with my hand on the back of the dining chair. The cardigan on my shoulders clung to me, stale heat and fryer smoke tucked into the wool. I let the silence be longer than usual, like a coin sliding down a well. "I won't," I said finally. My voice was steady. I pulled out the chair, the one with the wobbly leg that no one else touches, and sat there instead. The dining table was a museum of other people's lives, a stack of glossy mail addressed to Sophie Daniels, Lily's math homework with little hearts over the eyes, a pizza flyer, an empty glass with a pink lipstick ring. My handwriting, grocery lists, pay stubs folded neat, had been pushed to the edge like crumbs. Lily yawned, tugged her blanket up, and turned the volume higher. "Mom said you left the pan greasy last time," she added, like an afterthought that wanted to hurt. "Try to clean better." "Of course," I said. I watched steam rise from the kettle I hadn't yet set to boil. I took off my shoes and lined them up by the baseboard, because the dirt of a job doesn't get to walk on the things you own. I washed my hands again at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the space between each finger until the skin stung. The lemon soap couldn't fight chicken and salt, but it tried. My tea mug, the chipped blue one from a garage sale 15 years ago, waited in its spot. I turned the kettle on and opened the cupboard for the cheap black tea I buy in bags that promise comfort and deliver routine. The quiet of boiling water filled the room until I could hear the bubbles sound like rain under tin. Sophie's keys jingled from the hallway. She didn't come in. A door closed. Voices murmured. A laugh. The kind of private sound that says the world you built now belongs to someone else. I cupped the mug and sat at the table again, not touching the couch, not touching anything that would be mentioned later. The tea burned the tip of my tongue and woke me up in a way sleep wouldn't. On the far wall, the photograph of my husband hung straight. He was standing in front of this house in a suit we couldn't afford, a grin that made strangers grin back. I remembered how his hand felt on the small of my back when we crossed this threshold for the first time. I remembered the list we made on a napkin. Paint the porch, plant hydrangeas, raise our daughter into someone who would never be unkind. It isn't the big moments that turn you. It's a sentence tossed like a bone. Don't sit on the couch. You'll make it smell. As if I were smoke, as if I were a stain that never comes out. I set the mug down and folded my hands. The bones looked like a map. I'd always been good with maps. You don't get from one place to another by wishing. You get there because you start walking. Good night, Lily, I said. Night, she answered, distracted. I stood, took my cardigan off and hung it by the back door. I put the kettle away. I wiped the clean counter once for me. When I climbed the stairs, I didn't look at the couch at all. In my room, I closed the door softly and sat on the edge of the bed until the muscles in my calves stopped singing. The window was cracked. The night came in and cooled the room, brought with it the smell of wet pavement and something sweet from the honeysuckle climbing the fence. On my dresser, under the little glass dish that holds my rings, was a phone number written in neat block letters on the back of a store receipt. I'd tucked it there months ago and pretended I'd lost it. The number belonged to a man who had shaken my hand at the bank after the funeral and said, "If you ever need to talk about paperwork, Mrs. Hale, give me a call." I slid the receipt out and smoothed it flat with my palm. I didn't dial. Not yet. I turned off the lamp and lay back, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of fryers and timers and orders shouted over noise. I dreamed of keys changing hands, of doors opening and closing, of the sound a pen makes when it finishes writing a name that matters. By 6, the house smelled like cereal sugar and a candle that tried too hard to be ocean. I was always up first. Old habits make their own alarms. I moved through the kitchen the way nurses move through dark rooms, quiet, purposeful, touching only what needs touching. On the fridge, Sophie had taped a new page of house rules in a loopy marker that looked like a teenager's. No shoes on the rug. Wipe surfaces after cooking. No strong odors on furniture. Keep your things in your room. Underneath, in smaller letters, please respect shared spaces. The please wasn't for me. It was for guests who might read it and think we were a cheerful, organized family. My tea lived on the second shelf now, in a plastic bin labeled Grandma with a strip of blue painter's tape. Next to it, a deodorizer box sat open like a little mouth. I reached past it and took a bag. The kettle began its one good song. Sophie shuffled in wearing a robe, her hair twisted into a loose rope. She rubbed her temples the way people do when they want you to apologize for existing. "Morning," I said. "Morning." She opened a cupboard, frowned, and shut it again. "Lily's got an early practice. Don't run the blender while she's sleeping, okay? It vibrates the wall." "I don't use the blender." "Right," she said, already pouring almond milk into a bowl. "Also, the plumber's coming at 2. Can you be here to let him in?" "I have a shift," I said. She glanced up surprised, as if the job I had every night were a new inconvenience. "Maybe text Darius to cover?" The sink is more important right now. I'll make it work, I said, because it was easier, because every no cost me twice. She set her bowl on the counter and scrolled her phone. And can you not put your uniform in the washer with our stuff? The smell sticks. Use the small cycle, please, and run it twice. I've been washing clothes since the machine had a ringer, I said, trying to let humor carry what pride wanted to say. She didn't hear it. Thanks. She took a bite, grimaced. Did you move the good spoons again? I can never find anything. I looked at the drawer. I had shifted them forward last night so she wouldn't have to reach. Top right, I said. She found one, rinsed it as if it had been through something terrible, and returned to her phone. By the way, rent is due on Friday. Lily's tutoring got cut this month, so we're tight. If you have anything left over. I left a check on the hall table yesterday, I said. Oh. She blinked, searching the counter as if checks grew there. Okay. I haven't looked. It's under the bowl with the keys, I said, next to the light switch. Okay. She nodded, already somewhere else. Can you remind me to grab it before work? I will. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water, breathed the steam, and felt the first clean minute of the day ease into me. Sophie carried her cereal to the couch and tucked her legs under her, careful not to disturb the throw pillows arranged like an altar. The remote lived there now, on a little tray with coasters, because the couch had become a place with rules. I stayed at the table. That was where my world fit. A square of wood, one wobbly leg, the corner light that caught in my cup. The mail came in a glossy flood. Flyers for yoga studios, credit card offers with promises in bold, envelopes addressed to Sophie Daniels and sometimes to current resident, which felt honest. My envelopes, thin, official, stamped with words like notice and received, I stacked in a tidy pile and held together with a paperclip. They slid to the edge each day, and I slid them back. Lily thundered down the hall at 7:30. She moved like a storm the house had learned to expect. Hoodie, backpack, phone pressed flat to her palm. Where's my black sneakers? She asked the open air. In the laundry room, I said. I cleaned the soles for you. They were muddy. She paused in the doorway, her eyes flicking to my hands around the mug, to the chair under me, to the couch behind me. Did you sit there? She asked, chin tilting at the cushions. No. Good. She bumped past me to the laundry room, pulled the sneakers from the dryer, and slipped them on without untying. Coach said we can't be late. Mom, can you drive? In 5, Sophie said from the couch, without looking up. Lily's gaze landed on the house rules, and she smiled, like she'd hung a medal. We should add no greasy stuff in the dishwasher. Ms. Patel says oil ruins the filter. I wash my pans by hand, I said. You missed a spot last time, she said, automatic as a traffic light. The handle was gross. I'll clean it again. She pulled her hair into a ponytail, examined herself in the microwave reflection, and kissed air in my direction. Bye, Grandma. Bye, Lil. When the door shut behind them, the quiet they left felt different from the quiet before they woke. Emptier, somehow. I rinsed my mug and wiped the counter. The rag moved in muscle memory. Corners, handles, the little lip where crumbs hide. I opened the window over the sink. Honeysuckle slipped in and softened the last of the fryer in my skin. Upstairs, in the room that had been my sewing room before it became a place to store other people's things, I kept a shoebox on the top shelf of the closet. No one looked in it because it was boring. Old warranties, tax stubs, a marriage certificate folded along a life. I took it down and sat on the bed. The mattress let out the soft sigh beds make when you still belong to them. Inside the box, I found the deed packet from the year we refinanced. My husband's handwriting, blocky, careful, filled the margins with notes. Ask about escrow. Don't forget gutters. He had underlined our names the way some men underline verses. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal until the paper warmed. I didn't pull anything out. I didn't need to read to remember. I put the packet back and slid the box to the shelf again, then stood on my toes to push it behind a stack of quilts. Someone had tucked a plastic tub of Halloween decorations in front of it last fall. A rubber bat peeked from a crack, grin frozen wide. I pushed it in. On my way downstairs, I passed the hallway mirror and caught my face in the edge, the part of your reflection that doesn't get the good light. My hair was neat. My collar lay flat. The lines around my mouth looked like roads on a map that all led to the same crossroads. In the kitchen, the plumbing under the sink ticked and popped as if it had something to say. I checked the time. I could make the early bus and still pick up an extra half hour before the lunch rush. Extra half hours keep lights on. They also keep people from asking where you were when the doorbell rang. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands and opened it to a man in a polo with Town and Tap plumbing stitched over his heart. He smelled like new PVC and dryer sheets. "Morning," he said. "Here for the kitchen sink." I stepped back. "Come in." He crouched under the cabinet, his work light, throwing a bright oval. "You the homeowner?" he asked, the way men ask when they need permission to fix things. I opened my mouth and closed it again, then said, "Yes." He smiled without looking up. "We'll get you fixed right up, ma'am." I folded my arms and leaned against the counter. Somewhere in the house, a clock started its measured knocking. The plumber hummed a tune I couldn't place. Water, captured and released, murmured through the pipes like a conversation in another room. This is my house, I thought, not for the first time, not for the last. I thought it plainly, the way you think your name when you're signing it. I thought it the way you practice a sentence before you finally say it out loud. When he finished, he stood, wiped his hands, and held out a clipboard. "Signature?" I signed where he pointed. My hand didn't shake. "Have a good one," he said, packing his tools. "You too." After he left, I sat at the table again and wrote out a grocery list. Bread, eggs, lemons, degreaser, because they like it when the bottle stays on the counter like a promise. I added stamps and envelopes, then felt silly and crossed them out. There were plenty in the drawer. The bus schedule lay under the pizza flyer. I slid it free and folded it into my pocket. The number on the back of the receipt upstairs pressed against my memory like a pebble in a shoe. Not painful, just present. At 11, the light came through the window and striped the floor. I watched the dust move. I have always been good at waiting. Waiting is not surrender. It's aim. The lunch rush at KFC begins before the word lunch even makes sense. By 10:30, the line snakes out the door, a mixture of construction workers in neon vests, mothers with sticky toddlers, and teenagers who come not for food, but for somewhere cheap to sit. The fryers roar like engines, the oil snaps at your skin, and the whole place smells like one long afternoon that never ends. I tied my apron tighter, though the string had thinned from too many knots. My hands moved before my mind did. Drop the chicken, pull the biscuits, fold the boxes, wipe the counter. My knees ached like wet wood, but muscle memory kept the rhythm. "Margaret, can you grab that tray?" Darius called. sliding a stack toward me. He was young enough to laugh through the steam. His shoulders didn't notice the weight. "Got it," I said, lifting anyway. The tray burned the soft part of my palms, and the load pulled at my back. I carried it to the counter, each step careful, my shoes already soaked in the day's grease. A woman at the register frowned at me the way people do when they wonder why someone my age is still here. Her eyes slid away before pity became words. I pretended not to notice. "You learn to carry more than trays." By noon, the orders blurred. 12-piece original, family meal, extra gravy. The clock ticked in ketchup packets and chicken bones. When the manager barked about the pace, I bit my tongue. When a customer snapped that her fries were cold, I remade them without a word. Break time came 15 minutes late. I sank into the plastic chair in the back, wiped my forehead with a paper napkin, and flexed my fingers one by one. My uniform clung to me, salt and sweat stitched into the fabric. "You should take it easy, Miss Margaret," said Rosa, the high schooler on her second week. She looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. "Why do you even work nights? You don't have to prove anything to anyone." I smiled because it was easier than explaining. "Bills don't care how old you are," I said. She laughed, but I meant it. The truth was simpler and uglier. I worked so that the lights stayed on, so Sophie wouldn't complain about the electric bill, so Lily's practices and subscriptions and brand new sneakers came without anyone pointing at me. I worked because when my husband died, I learned that silence fills with responsibility if you don't fight it. I clocked back in. The fryer hissed, the timer shrieked, the bags tore. Grease leapt on my wrist, leaving a red dot that would become a blister by morning. I didn't flinch. Hours later, after the final trays were stacked and the counters scrubbed until they shone, I peeled off my gloves and felt my skin buzz like it had been plugged into the wall all day. Darius clapped me on the shoulder. "Machine," he said again. I only nodded. Machines don't complain. Machines don't sit on couches. Machines keep working until the cord frays. When I left, the sun had already given up. The bus smelled of damp coats and old gum. I sat by the window, hands in my lap, and watched the city roll by in strips of neon and rain. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered that morning. Home was warm, but not for me. Sophie's laughter drifted from the living room, mingling with Lily's high, sharp voice. They were watching a show, popcorn scattered on the couch I wasn't allowed to touch. I walked past them with quiet steps, careful not to interrupt. In the kitchen, I set my bag down and washed my hands. The water stung the blister on my wrist, but I kept scrubbing until the smell of fryer oil dulled. On the table sat the grocery list I'd written that morning. Next to it was a post-it in Sophie's handwriting. Margaret. Don't forget to buy air freshener. The house smelled like grease yesterday. I read it twice. My hand trembled, but not from the weight of the day. I folded the note once, then again, until it was a small square I could hide in my palm. I didn't throw it away. I slid it into my pocket instead. Some things you keep, not because you want to, but because they remind you. I looked toward the living room, at the glow of the television on their faces. They didn't notice me. They rarely did. I sat at the dining table, on the chair with the wobbly leg, and held the folded note. This house smelled like grease, they said. But it wasn't the house. It was me. And I thought, for the first time, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Friday nights at the house had changed. When my husband was alive, They used to mean board games on the porch, his laugh booming louder than the crickets, and me baking something that smelled like comfort. Now, Friday nights meant Lily's friends filling the living room with perfume clouds, phone flashes, and the kind of laughter that isn't warm. It's sharp, like glass breaking. I came home from my shift later than usual, shoulders heavy from hauling the fryer baskets. The porch light glowed, but the sound inside was louder than the hum of the night. Music thumping, voices climbing over one another. I opened the door slowly. The living room was crowded. 4 girls sprawled across the couch. I wasn't allowed to touch. Soda cans on the coffee table, chip crumbs ground into the rug. Lily stood in the middle like a host on a stage, hair curled, eyeliner thick, her phone in her hand raised like a mirror to the world. "Grandma's here," she announced when she saw me, in that tone teenagers use when they want the audience to laugh. Heads turned, eyes scanned me. The KFC uniform, the tired shoes, the cardigan I carried on my arm. One girl wrinkled her nose dramatically. "You," another whispered. "She smells like chicken." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel at first. It was just easy for them, like stepping on a dry leaf. But it grew. Lily smirked. "She always smells like that," she said. "We call her Grease Grandma." The words landed like hot oil on skin. The girls burst out laughing, clutching their stomachs, leaning into each other. Phones came up, flashes popped. Maybe I was a joke on someone's story already. I stood in the doorway, cardigan still folded, shoes leaving faint prints on the floor. My first instinct was silence. The old habit. If you don't react, maybe it will pass. My hands gripped the fabric until the seams dug into my palms. One of the girls waved a hand in front of her nose. "No wonder your couch smells, Lil." "Don't sit down, Grandma," Lily said quickly, her voice high and theatrical. "We don't want grease stains tonight." The room shook with their laughter again. I could have walked past them into the kitchen. I could have hidden in my room. That's what I had done for months, shrinking smaller, quieter, until I fit into the spaces no one else wanted. But something in me rebelled, something older and sturdier than exhaustion. I stepped farther into the room. The noise softened just a notch, as if the floor itself had shifted under them. I set my cardigan neatly over the back of the chair. "Lily," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Don't talk to me that way." The room stilled for half a second. Lily blinked, her mouth parted, caught between surprise and performance. Then she laughed again, louder, tossing her hair. "Oh my God, did you hear that? She's mad. Grease Grandma's mad." Her friends howled. One imitated a chicken flap, arms waving. Another pinched her nose and pretended to faint. Something inside me went very still, not broken, not bruised, still like a pond before a storm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. "This is my house," I said quietly. They didn't hear me, or they pretended not to. Sophie appeared from the hallway, drawn by the noise. She looked at me, then at the girls, then back at me again, irritation sharpening her features. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Lily said quickly. "Grandma's being dramatic." Sophie sighed, crossing her arms. "Mom, please, don't make a scene. They're just kids." "They're not just kids," I answered, still calm. "They're your daughter's guests, and they're laughing at me in my own living room." Sophie pinched the bridge of her nose like she was the one burdened. "Please, just go to your room, Mom. You live here for free. Don't make things harder than they need to be." The words hit harder than the laughter. For free. As if my paychecks didn't slide under the bowl with the keys. As if the mortgage years, the papers with my husband's handwriting, the deed with my name embossed, meant nothing. I looked at Sophie, then at Lily, then at the couch I wasn't allowed to touch. The noise of the fryer, the sting of the oil, the smell in my hair, all of it wrapped around me like armor instead of shame. I didn't answer. I just nodded once, slowly, and turned away. I heard the laughter resume behind me, softer now, uncertain, as if my silence unsettled them more than my words. Upstairs in my room, I sat on the bed and opened the dresser drawer where I kept the receipt with the lawyer's number. I ran my thumb over the ink, smoothed the crease where I had folded it months ago. Their voices downstairs blended with the television, rising and falling like waves. But in my room, the quiet was heavy and purposeful. I could still hear Lily's words echoing, "Grease Grandma." But now, instead of burning, they cooled into something solid. They thought I was small. They thought I would stay silent forever. I placed the receipt on the nightstand where I could see it. For the first time, I didn't push it away. Because free? No. Nothing in this house had ever been free. And someday soon, they were going to learn the cost. Sleep didn't come easily after that night. Laughter echoed up the stairs, muffled through the walls, but it carried a sting sharper than the grease burns on my wrists. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like road maps, thinking about how the word free had been tossed at me like garbage. You live here for free. As if this roof hadn't been built over decades of my work. As if walls could forget the hands that raised them. The receipt with the lawyer's number glowed pale under the lamplight, a small rectangle of promise. But instead of calling, I let my mind wander backward, back to the years when the house smelled not of grease and candles, but of wet paint and sawdust. I was 33 when we bought this place. My husband, Walter, walked through every room with his hand brushing the walls as though he were checking a heartbeat. The house wasn't much then. 2 bedrooms, sagging floors, a kitchen with linoleum that curled at the corners. But it was ours. We signed the papers at a desk that wobbled under the notary's pen. Walter shook the man's hand and grinned like a boy who'd just won a prize pig at the county fair. Outside, he picked me up right off the porch and spun me around until I laughed and begged him to put me down before the neighbors thought us mad. "We'll fix it up," he promised, still holding me by the waist. "Every nail, every shingle. We'll make it ours." And we did. We painted the siding a soft yellow, the color of sunlight on cream. We planted hydrangeas along the walk, blue as ocean spray. On Saturdays, Walter patched shingles while I stitched curtains from fabric bought on sale. On Sundays, we sat on the porch steps with lemonade, looking at the house like it was a third child. Inside, the kitchen became the center of everything. The table, our first real piece of furniture, was second-hand oak, but Walter sanded it smooth, and I covered the wobble with a folded slip of cardboard. Sophie grew up around that table, homework spread across it, birthday candles dripping onto its surface, sticky fingerprints wiped with cloths that smelled of lemon. I could still hear Walter's voice echoing through the walls. "As long as we're in this house, we'll always have a place to belong." And for years, it felt true. Even when money was tight, even when Walter's lungs grew weak and the hospital bills stacked like bricks, the house was steady. When he passed, I thought the walls might fall with him. But they held. They held me when nothing else did. The present pressed back in, harsher for the softness of memory. Now the hydrangeas outside were overgrown, their blooms fading gray. The yellow siding was chipped and tired. The kitchen table still stood, but my chair, the one Walter had claimed for me, had become the place no one else wanted. I went to the closet and pulled down the shoebox again. The deed was still inside, papers creased from years of folding and unfolding. Walter's handwriting sprawled across the margins. Little notes about gutters, escrow, paint colors we never chose. His name, next to mine, underlined twice, like he wanted to make sure the world remembered. I traced the letters with my finger, slow and deliberate. That signature was proof. This wasn't Sophie's house. It wasn't Lily's. It wasn't anyone's but mine. But when I walked downstairs the next morning, the proof didn't matter. Lily sat at the couch with a bowl of cereal, crumbs scattered across the cushions. Sophie stood at the counter with her coffee, already scrolling through her phone. My presence barely registered. "Grandma, can you clean my jersey before tonight?" Lily asked without looking up. "It stinks." "I can," I said, though my shift loomed. "And Mom," she added, "can we please do something about the smell in here? Like, I swear, it's getting worse." Sophie sighed. "We'll buy more air freshener." Her eyes flicked to me for half a second, quick as a blade. I pulled out my chair at the dining table, the wobble louder now than ever. My tea tasted bitter, though it was the same brand, the same cup. Across the table, Sophie set down her mug with a sigh. "Mom," she said carefully, "maybe it's time to think about other options." "Other options?" I asked. "You know, assisted living, or one of those apartments for seniors. Somewhere easier." The words slid across the table like ice. I looked at her, at the daughter I had raised under this very roof, and for the first time in years I saw her not as tired or stressed or distracted, but as someone who wanted me gone. "I don't need assisted living," I said softly. "Mom, this is my home," I interrupted, my voice low but steady. "I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Lily crunched her cereal loudly, filling the space with deliberate noise. Sophie sipped her coffee, avoiding my eyes. I finished my tea, washed the cup, and set it in the drying rack. Then I went upstairs again, to the box, to Walter's handwriting, to the deed that carried my name like a shield. The past wasn't enough anymore. Memories wouldn't keep me in this house. Not against Sophie, not against Lily. If they wanted me gone, then it was time to remind them whose name was written on the line that mattered. And next time, I wouldn't be quiet about it. By Monday morning, the air in the house was thick with a kind of silence that wasn't peace. It was dismissal. I had learned that silence could mean many things. Between Sophie and Lily, it meant we've already decided what you are. I pulled on my uniform, the fabric stiff from too many washes, and headed downstairs. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender spray, heavy and artificial, as if it were fighting a war against something that lived in the walls. My tea bin had been pushed farther back in the cupboard, behind Sophie's imported blends in glass jars with fancy labels. Lily sat at the counter with her phone, feet up on the stool. She didn't look up. "Grandma, the dishwasher's gross again." "Don't put your greasy pans in there. Mom had to clean it." "I washed them by hand," I said evenly. "Well, you missed spots. Useless old woman can't even clean a pan." The words snapped sharper than she intended, maybe, or maybe exactly as she intended. She didn't glance up to see how they landed. Something in me shifted. It didn't flare. No heat, no anger. just a slow tightening, like a rope being drawn knot by knot. "Lily," I said, my voice low, "don't call me that again." She snorted, thumbs still moving across her screen. "Relax. It's just a joke." "Jokes stop being jokes when no one laughs," I said. Her head lifted for a second, eyes rolling, before she muttered, "Whatever." Sophie breezed in then, keys jangling, her hair pinned in a rush. She kissed the top of Lily's head, barely noticing me at the stove. "Mom, can you handle laundry today? I don't have time. Just separate mine from yours, okay?" I nodded, but the rope tightened another inch. At KFC, the day was heavier than most. The fryer spit angrily, and the weight of trays dragged my arms down until I thought my shoulders would give. When the lunch crowd surged, I moved on instinct. Drop, flip, carry, clean. "Miss Margaret," Rosa said, when she found me in the back scrubbing pans, "you're hurting yourself. Look." I glanced at my wrist. The blister from last week had torn open. A fresh one was already forming above it. Purple bruises lined the soft skin under my elbow from lifting the trays. "It's nothing," I said, rinsing the pan harder. "It's not nothing," she insisted. "Why don't you, I don't know, talk to your family? Shouldn't they be taking care of you?" I smiled, but it felt brittle. "Some things you take care of yourself." She hesitated, then touched my arm gently. "My abuela always said, strength isn't how much you carry, it's knowing when to stop." I carried the pan to the rack and stacked it with the others. The weight in my chest was heavier than steel. By the time I got home, my arms were leaden. The living room lights glowed bright, laughter spilling into the hallway. Lily and Sophie were curled on the couch, watching something on TV, bowls of popcorn balanced between them. "Did you do the laundry?" Sophie asked, eyes fixed on the screen. "I'll do it now," I said. "Just make sure you don't mix things again," she added quickly. "Last time my sweater smelled like fryer oil. I can't wear that at work." Lily snickered. "She can't help it, Mom. She is fryer oil." The laughter was quiet, but it might as well have been thunder. I turned, slowly, toward them. Sophie waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, stop it, Lily." But she was smiling. I climbed the stairs without answering. Their voices followed me, fading with each step. In my room, I shut the door and leaned against it, breathing slowly. My wrists throbbed. My shoulders screamed. And my heart, the part that still wanted to believe I belonged here, was bruised worse than all of it. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the shoebox from the closet again. The deed, the notes, Walter's handwriting, all of it lay inside, unchanged, while I was worn thin. I held the papers on my lap, fingers pressed to the embossed seal. They called me useless, but these pages said otherwise. These pages were proof that everything here began with me. I folded the papers back into the box and set it carefully on the bed beside me. Strength wasn't about how much you could carry, Rosa's words echoed. Maybe strength was setting things down. Or maybe it was finally deciding what weight belonged to you and what didn't. Downstairs, their laughter rose again, careless, easy. I closed my eyes and thought, they believe I'm nothing. They believe I'll fade quietly into the corners. But I wasn't fading. I was waiting. Saturday came with a storm rolling low across the sky, clouds heavy and gray like damp wool. I'd hoped for quiet. But by mid-afternoon, Sophie had filled the kitchen with the clatter of plates and the hum of her voice on the phone. "Yes, come over," she said, pulling silverware from the drawer. "It'll just be casual, dinner, some wine. No big deal." She glanced at me when she hung up. We're having a few friends tonight. Could you maybe not make a mess in the kitchen until then? I'll stay out of the way, I said. She smiled faintly, as though relieved. Thanks, Mom. Just keep it simple. By evening, the table I'd polished for decades gleamed under candles Sophie had bought in bulk. A bottle of wine breathed on the counter. The smell of garlic and roasted chicken filled the house, richer than anything I usually cooked for myself. I stayed upstairs until I heard the doorbell. Voices followed. 2 couples, all polite chatter and the rustle of coats. Their laughter drifted up the staircase like perfume. When I finally came down, Sophie was pouring wine. Lily perched on the couch like a queen. Her friends' parents had come, respectable people in pressed shirts and dresses. Mom, Sophie said, catching me in the doorway, we set a spot for you, over there. I looked where she pointed, not at the dining table where everyone else sat with plates already served, but at the small side table against the wall. 1 chair, a placemat. A napkin folded too neatly, as if the precision could disguise the insult. The guests glanced at me, polite smiles, tight around the edges. One woman tilted her head, sympathy flickering across her face before she quickly looked away. I walked to the side table. The chair wobbled under me, the same one I always used. Sophie set a plate down, chicken, potatoes, vegetables, arranged beautifully. There you go, she said, her voice light, almost cheerful. Hope that's okay. The conversation resumed without me. Laughter, stories, the clink of glasses. I cut my food slowly, chewing with care, each bite tasting more of ash than spice. From the main table, Lily's voice carried, pitched high. Grandma works at KFC, you know, till midnight sometimes. A murmur of surprise, then a quick attempt at politeness. That's admirable, one of the guests said gently, but Lily laughed. Yeah, she comes home smelling like fries. We can tell even upstairs. The table chuckled, awkward, uncertain, but no one stopped her. Sophie gave a tight smile, not looking at me. My fork rested against the plate. I didn't speak. My silence had become their permission. I thought of Walter, his broad shoulders bent under this roof as he replaced beams, his hands black with paint, when he swore this house would be ours forever. I thought of his laugh at the head of this same table, and how he'd clap me on the back when I told stories about work. And here I was, tucked at the edge, like a stranger in a home I had built. I set my fork down carefully, folded the napkin over the plate, and lifted my glass of water. The reflection in the liquid was small, lined, but steady. I didn't interrupt their stories. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I listened, to the scrape of my chair on the floor, to the wobble of its leg, to the hollow echo of the space between us. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them think this is victory. Every humiliation is a stone, and I was building something with mine. When dinner ended, Sophie patted my shoulder lightly as she passed. Thanks for being flexible, Mom. I smiled back, thin as a blade. Of course, I said. But upstairs, in my room, I opened the dresser drawer and laid out the papers on the bed. The deed, the signatures, the proof. Each stone stacked higher, each silence heavier, and soon the weight would shift. The night after that dinner was worse than most shifts. A fryer overflowed, and the burn on my wrist deepened into a blister that stung each time I bent my hand. The manager barked orders louder than the timers, and I carried trays until my shoulders screamed. By the time I left, the clock outside glowed past midnight, and even the bus driver looked half asleep. I stepped off at my stop and climbed the porch stairs slowly. The yellow siding, chipped and tired, looked gray in the streetlight. Walter's porch lamp still shone, though the bulb flickered. Inside, the house was dark except for the glow of the television. The living room reeked faintly of perfume spray, the kind Sophie and Lily used to cover smells. I slipped off my shoes, placed them neatly by the wall, and stood in the doorway. The couch called to me. My body ached for it. My legs wobbled under me like wood left too long in rain. The wobbly dining chair waited in its corner, but I couldn't face it tonight. For the first time in months, I walked straight to the couch and lowered myself into the cushions. The fabric sighed under my weight. It wasn't the same couch Walter had chosen with me all those years ago. Sophie had replaced it, but it still felt like home in some small way. I let out a long breath, closed my eyes, and listened to the hum of the TV. It lasted less than a minute. The hallway light snapped on. Lily's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and loud. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her bare feet slapping the floor as she rushed in. Her hair was tangled from sleep, her eyes narrowed. "I'm sitting," I said calmly, though my heart pounded. "I told you not to sit there," she shouted, her voice climbing high. "Now it's gonna smell again." Her words cracked in the room like thunder. She marched forward, snatching up the throw blanket as if it had been contaminated, holding it away from her body. "Do you even care?" she snapped. "You ruin everything." I sat very still. My hands rested on my knees. My bones ached, but something deeper inside me was steady, unmoved. "Lily," I said, my voice level, "you don't speak to me like that." She froze, startled, not because I was loud, but because I wasn't. Because for the first time, my words didn't shrink. Her lip curled. "Or what? You'll cry? You'll go hide in your room again? This isn't even your house." The sentence landed harder than her shouting. Sophie's words now sharpened in Lily's mouth. "This isn't even your house." But instead of burning, the words cooled into iron inside me. I stood slowly, my joints protesting. I faced her, close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet my eyes. "This house is mine," I said softly. "Every wall, every brick. Mine." Her bravado faltered. For the first time, she stepped back. But then she laughed, high and brittle. "You're crazy." She tossed the blanket onto the floor and stormed back down the hall. "Wait until Mom hears." Her door slammed. Silence pressed in again, heavier than before, but different, thicker, charged. I lowered myself back onto the couch, deliberate this time. I sat there for a long while, letting the cushions hold me, letting the weight of what just happened sink into me. My hands rested flat against the fabric, claiming it as mine. On the wall, Walter's photograph caught the TV's glow. His grin looked almost conspiratorial, like he was in on something. I whispered to him, so low even the house wouldn't hear. "It's time." Upstairs on my nightstand, the folded receipt with the lawyer's number waited. Tomorrow, I would use it. And this time, I wouldn't nod. I wouldn't hide. I would take back what was mine. The next morning, I didn't go straight to the bus stop. My uniform hung on the back of the chair, but I left it there, folded. Instead, I took out the shoebox, placed the deed inside a plain canvas bag, and slipped the folded receipt with the lawyer's number into my cardigan pocket. The sun was barely up. The house was quiet. Sophie still asleep. Lily snoring through her door. For once, I didn't make tea. I didn't even touch the kettle. I walked straight out the door, locking it behind me with the key that was still, after all these years, mine. The bus into town felt different without the scent of fryer oil clinging to me yet. My hands smelled faintly of paper, of ink, of old cardboard. I clutched the bag on my lap and watched the city roll by. Buildings blurred, but I wasn't daydreaming this time. My focus was sharp, as if every stop drew me closer to something I'd been circling for months. Mr. Harris's office was small, tucked above a pharmacy on Main Street. The kind of place where the stairs creak and the waiting room smells faintly of dust and carpet cleaner. His secretary looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Hale?" "Yes," I said, adjusting the bag on my shoulder. "I have an appointment." She nodded quickly and ushered me in. Mr. Harris was a kind-eyed man with thinning hair, the sort who spoke softly, so you had to lean in to catch every word. He rose when I entered, shook my hand firmly, and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "It's been a while," he said, smiling gently. "What brings you here today?" I set the canvas bag on his desk and pulled out the deed. My hands didn't tremble. "I want to know exactly who owns this house." He slid on his glasses, scanned the papers, flipped through the signatures, his brow furrowed as he read, lips moving silently. Finally, he leaned back and tapped the page with his finger. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "this property is still in your name. Sole ownership. No transfer. No cosigners. No liens. Nothing has changed since you and your husband purchased it." The words struck me like a bell, loud, clear, undeniable. My name. Sole owner. "Not even Sophie?" I asked, though I already knew. He shook his head. "Not legally. She has no claim to the property unless you grant it. And as of now, you haven't." I let out a slow breath, one I felt in my bones. For months, they had spoken as though I were a guest. For years, I had let myself believe it. But here, in black ink, embossed seal, was the truth. The house was mine. It had always been mine. "What do you want to do?" Mr. Harris asked gently. I thought of Lily's voice, sharp and mocking. "Grease, Grandma." I thought of Sophie's sigh. "You live here for free." I thought of sitting alone at a side table while others feasted at mine. I met his eyes. "I want to make it official again. No confusion. No one else's name but mine." He nodded, pulling forms from a drawer. "We can file a reaffirmation of ownership. It won't change the deed, but it will put a legal timestamp that confirms your sole rights as of now. If there's ever a dispute, this will end it." I signed where he pointed. The pen felt heavy but right in my hand. Each stroke carved a line through months of silence. My name, written steady. When we finished, he placed the papers in a folder and slid it across the desk. "Keep this safe," he said. "And Mrs. Hale, you have more power than you realize." I stood, clutching the folder. "Thank you, Mr. Harris." On the bus ride back, I didn't look out the window. I held the folder tight to my chest, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't just paper, it was armor. It was proof. It was a key to every door in that house. At home, Sophie was in the kitchen, her hair damp from the shower, coffee mug in hand. She glanced at the folder. "What's that?" "Paperwork," I said simply, and walked past her. Upstairs, I placed the folder inside the shoebox, tucking it beneath Walter's old notes. Then I set the box at the very front of the closet. Not hidden, not buried. Visible. Accessible. Mine. That evening, as I carried another load of laundry, Lily brushed past me in the hallway, wrinkling her nose. "You're washing your greasy clothes with ours again, aren't you?" I looked at her, not flinching. They're my clothes. In my washer. In my house. She blinked, caught off guard. What's your problem? I didn't answer. I just carried the basket into the laundry room, steady as stone. Because now I wasn't waiting anymore. Now I was preparing. The folder stayed in the shoebox, but its presence changed the air in my room. Every time I opened the closet, I saw it waiting there like a quiet ally. The house no longer felt like their fortress. It felt like a stage, and I was moving silently behind the curtain, setting pieces in place. I knew Sophie. I knew Lily. Words alone wouldn't change them. They'd roll their eyes, laugh, dismiss. If the day came when I had to stand against them, I would need more than memory. I would need proof. So I began collecting it. The first step was photographs. When Sophie and Lily left in the morning, I walked through the house with the old digital camera Walter had bought me years ago. I took pictures of the mail, envelopes addressed to me with bills I had paid, checks I had written. I photographed the deed again, each page spread on the bed under the lamplight. Then I turned the camera on the house itself. The garden Walter and I had planted, the porch we painted with our own hands, the yellow siding he climbed ladders to fix. These weren't just walls. They were our fingerprints, our sweat. Mine. I uploaded the pictures onto a flash drive and slipped it into a small tin where I once kept buttons. I tucked the tin into my sewing box. No one ever opened that. The second step was keeping a record. When Lily sneered at me, when Sophie brushed me aside, I wrote it down in a spiral notebook. January 14th. Lily called me useless old woman. Sophie did not intervene. January 16th. Told not to sit on couch. Told I live here for free. January 17th. Placed at separate table during dinner with guests. Line after line, a catalog of cruelty. Small things, they might argue, but stacked together, they became undeniable. Sometimes my hand trembled as I wrote, but not from weakness, from clarity. Seeing their words in ink stripped them of their excuses. The third step came almost by accident. Rosa, at KFC, noticed me rubbing my shoulder as I carried a tray. "You should talk to someone about this," she said. "About the pain?" I asked. "About everything," she replied. That night, I borrowed a small voice recorder from her. "Just in case," she said, pressing it into my hand. At home, I hid it in my pocket. When Lily shouted at me for touching the thermostat, I pressed record. When Sophie sighed and said, "Mom, you make things harder than they need to be," I pressed record. Their voices filled the little machine. Proof. Not just my memory, sound. Undeniable. The more I gathered, the calmer I became. My anger dulled into something sharper. Purpose. Each insult was no longer just pain. It was evidence. Each dismissal was another brick in the wall I was building. They didn't notice. Why would they? To them, I was still small. I was still Grease grandma. Still the woman who scrubbed pans and folded laundry without protest. But at night, when they were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table under the hum of the fridge and reviewed the flash drive, the notebook, the recorder. I organized everything into neat piles. Walter would have approved of that. He always said order was a kind of strength. One evening, Sophie caught me sitting at the table with the notebook open. "What are you writing?" she asked, curiosity edged with suspicion. "Lists," I said simply, sliding the notebook shut. "Of what?" "Things I need to remember." She shrugged, poured herself a glass of wine, and walked away. She didn't ask again. The turning point came the night Lily hosted another gathering. Her friends laughed in the living room, the same sharp giggles, the same rolling eyes. I stayed upstairs until I heard the word again, Grease Grandma. They thought it was funny enough to repeat, to chant. I turned on the recorder in my pocket and walked down the stairs. When I entered the room, Lily froze for a split second, then smirked. "Hey everyone, this is her, the legend herself, Grease Grandma." Her friends burst out laughing. Phones lifted, recording me. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I simply sat in the wobbly chair at the side of the room, recorder humming in my pocket, collecting every word. By the end of the night, I had 30 minutes of tape filled with their voices. Lily thought she'd humiliated me. Sophie, watching from the doorway, thought she'd kept the peace. But I knew better. I went upstairs, closed my door, and placed the recorder gently on the nightstand. The notebook, the flash drive, the deed, the folder. They were no longer just scraps of survival. They were my arsenal. And when the time came, I would use every piece. It happened on a Saturday night. One of those evenings when the air outside was cold enough to sting the lungs, but inside the house it was hot and sour with perfume, spilled soda, and too many bodies pressed into one space. I came home late from my shift, shoulders aching from carrying boxes of frozen chicken down to the walk-in. My uniform clung damp against my skin. From the porch, I could already hear the thumping bass of music. Laughter spilled out when I opened the door, high, shrill, careless. The living room looked like a stranger's place. Teenagers everywhere. On the couch, on the floor, standing with red cups in their hands. Chips ground into the rug, soda cans balanced on the edge of the table, someone's jacket tossed over the back of the chair, I usually claimed. Lily was in the middle, dancing, her hair whipping, her voice louder than all the rest. She saw me and her smirk curled sharp. "Hey, look who it is!" she shouted over the music. "Grease Grandma made it!" A wave of laughter followed. Phones lifted, flashes popped. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. I set my bag on the floor and stood by the doorway. "Turn that down," I said, my voice steady. "No one cares, Grandma," one of Lily's friends slurred. "Yeah, don't kill the vibe," another added, tipping her cup. "Turn it down," I repeated, firmer this time. Lily rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. She stomped toward the speaker, then whirled back on me. "God, you're such a buzzkill. This isn't your house." She jabbed her finger toward me, her face twisted, in something that was no longer a performance for friends. It was venom. "This isn't your house, old hag." The room gasped, then laughed again, softer this time, unsure. But I only heard the first part. "This isn't your house." The words cracked something open inside me. Not pain. No, pain was familiar. This was different. It was clarity. I looked around. The couch stained with soda, the rug ground with crumbs, the table dented where someone had dropped a bottle. The home Walter and I had built turned into a playground for children who thought themselves untouchable. I stepped forward, not loud, not fast, just steady. "It is my house," I said. "Every wall, every brick. Mine." Lily barked out a laugh, brittle. "Oh my God, you're insane!" She shoved past me toward the kitchen, bumping my shoulder harder than needed. Something toppled behind me. A chair, knocked over by careless feet. A boy stumbled into the bookshelf, sending framed photos crashing to the floor. Glass shattered, scattering across the hardwood. "Oops," he mumbled, drunk giggles following. I bent down slowly, lifting one of the frames. It was a picture of Walter holding Sophie as a baby, their smiles so full it almost hurt to look at. The glass had cracked across his face, splitting it down the middle. I turned the frame toward the room. "Out," I said. A few kids laughed nervously. Lily barked. "Don't listen to her. She doesn't make the rules here." But my voice didn't waver. "Get out." Something in the way I said it silenced the room. One by one, kids shuffled toward the door, muttering, pulling on jackets, dragging bags. The music still thumped until I walked to the speaker and yanked the cord out of the wall. Silence. Lily stood frozen, rage blooming red on her face. "You embarrassed me," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how pathetic you look? This is my house, my friends, my rules." I stepped closer, the broken frame still in my hand. "No," I said, low and certain. "It isn't. You've forgotten whose name is written on the papers. But you're about to remember." She faltered, eyes wide for a fraction of a second, then spat. "Crazy old woman." I turned away, set the frame carefully on the table, and picked up the broom from the corner. I swept the glass slowly, methodically, the way you do when you know no one else will clean it. Behind me, Lily stormed off, her door slamming so hard the wall shook. But the silence that followed wasn't defeat. It was anticipation. Because the time for collecting proof was over. The time for action had come. The morning after the party, the house smelled of stale soda and spilled beer. My shoulders ached from sweeping glass until nearly dawn, but I rose before Sophie and Lily. Quiet has always been my ally. I walked room by room, not to clean, no, not anymore, but to look, to take in the stains on the rug, the dent in the table, the photos knocked askew. This was my home, desecrated, and the echo of Lily's scream, "This isn't your house, old hag," still clung to the walls like mildew. I opened the closet, pulled the shoebox forward, and lifted the folder Mr. Harris had given me. The embossed seal caught the light like a coin. I placed it in my canvas bag, added the recorder, the flash drive, and the notebook. Then I zipped it shut. Today would not be about memory. Today would be about action. The bus ride into town was strangely calm. The hum of the engine, the rattle of loose windows, the way the same tired nurse dozed against the seat. It all felt like background noise. My hands rested on the bag in my lap, steady. No trembling, no hesitation. Mr. Harris looked surprised to see me again so soon. "Mrs. Hale?" he said warmly. "Back already?" "Yes." I placed the bag on his desk and began unloading. The folder, the recorder, the notebook, the flash drive. "I need to make this final." He adjusted his glasses, brows knitting. "Final in what way?" "They treat me as if I'm a guest," I said, my voice calm but firm. "They tell me this isn't my house. They've laughed at me, humiliated me, even broken the things Walter and I built together. I won't have it anymore. I want this house legally, publicly, irrevocably, in my name only." "It already is," he reminded gently. "You're the sole owner." "Yes," I said, "but I want it reaffirmed, recorded, so there can be no doubt, no loophole, no argument, and—" I tapped the notebook, then the recorder. "If they try to challenge me, I want them to face this." He listened, then opened a drawer, pulling out a thick stack of forms. "We can file a declaration of sole ownership with the county clerk. It's not required, but once it's entered into the public record, there will be no mistaking it. If your daughter or granddaughter attempt to claim tenancy, these documents will strip them of any legal standing." His words slid into me like iron. "That's what I want." He nodded slowly. "It's a strong step. You're sure?" I thought of Lily's laugh, Sophie's sigh, the side table at the dinner, the couch I wasn't allowed to touch. I thought of Walter's underlined signature. "I'm sure," I said. The pen didn't feel heavy this time. It felt like a key turning in a long rusted lock. I signed every page, slow and deliberate, my name written steady, strong. Each stroke was an act of reclamation. When it was done, Mr. Harris gathered the forms into a neat stack and slipped them into an envelope. He stamped it with the county seal and slid it across the desk. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hale. As of today, there is no legal ambiguity. This house is yours, and yours alone." I held the envelope to my chest. Relief didn't come, not yet, but resolve did. "Thank you," I said. "You deserve peace," he replied softly. "I hope this brings it to you." On the bus ride home, I didn't look out the window. I stared at the envelope, at the weight of it in my lap. My fingers pressed the seal until it left an impression on my skin. When I stepped off at my stop, the house loomed ahead of me. For the first time in years, I didn't see it as a place I was shrinking inside. I saw it as territory reclaimed. Inside, Sophie was at the kitchen counter, sipping coffee. Lily sat on the couch, scrolling her phone. Neither looked up when I entered. I walked straight past them, upstairs to my room, and placed the envelope in the shoebox. Then I set the shoebox on the dresser instead of hiding it. Visible. Present. At dinner, Sophie asked absently, "Mom, can you cover utilities this month? Things are tight again?" I looked at her, my face calm, my voice even. "We'll discuss it tomorrow." She blinked, surprised, but didn't press. Lily rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. I didn't answer. That night, I sat in the living room long after they'd gone to bed. On the couch. My couch. I leaned back into the cushions, folded my hands, and let the silence settle. The deed was no longer just a memory. It was a weapon, and the time to use it was coming soon. The next morning broke with a brittle kind of quiet. Frost clung to the windows, the sun barely rising. I sat at the dining table with my tea, black, plain, steady, while Sophie and Lily stirred awake upstairs. The shoebox rested beside me on the chair, the envelope with the declaration tucked neatly inside. I could have revealed it then, slammed it onto the table while the house was still sleepy and soft. But patience is a weapon too. I waited. By 9, Sophie patted down in her robe, yawning, her phone in hand. Lily followed soon after, already dressed for practice, hoodie zipped, hair pulled into a careless ponytail. Sophie poured herself coffee and frowned at the empty cereal box on the counter. "Mom, did you forget to go shopping yesterday?" "No," I said evenly. "I decided not to." Her head lifted, surprise flashing. "What do you mean you decided not to?" "I mean," I said, "that I make the choices about this house, not you." Lily snorted, grabbing her backpack. "Oh, here we go again. The whole my house speech. You don't pay the bills, Grandma. You don't even sit on the couch without us begging you not to stink it up." My hands rested flat on the table, steady. "Sit down, Lily." She blinked, caught off guard by the command in my voice. "What?" I said, "Sit down." Something in the tone made her obey, dropping into a chair with a huff. Sophie set her mug down, cautious now. "Mom, what's going on?" I reached down, lifted the shoebox, and set it on the table between us. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the lid. The papers lay stacked neatly inside. The deed, Walter's notes, the reaffirmation Mr. Harris had filed just yesterday. I slid the envelope forward, letting the county seal catch the morning light. This, I said, my voice low but unshaking, is proof. Legal, binding, undeniable proof. This house belongs to me, not to you, not to Lily. To me. Sophie blinked, color draining from her face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about ownership, I replied. Every wall, every floorboard, every inch of this property is mine. Your name is not on a single page. Neither is Lily's. You live here because I allow it. And after the way you've treated me, that allowance is ending. Lily rolled her eyes, but her smirk wavered. You're bluffing. I reached into the envelope and spread the documents out across the table, page after page of signatures, stamps, embossed seals. My name printed over and over, Walter's handwriting still in the margins of the older deed. Read, I said. Sophie leaned forward, hands trembling slightly as she scanned the pages. She looked up, her voice shaky. Mom, you can't be serious. I am, I said, cutting her off. For months you've told me this isn't my house. You've laughed at me, humiliated me, treated me like a stranger in my own home. But here, I tapped the documents, each word a hammer striking steel. Here is the truth. This house was mine the day Walter and I bought it. It was mine the day we planted those hydrangeas. It is mine today and tomorrow and every day until I choose otherwise. Lily's voice cracked sharp. You can't just kick us out. Yes, I said quietly, with a calmness that silenced them both. I can. The room went still. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock above the fridge. Sophie swallowed hard. Mom, please. We didn't mean... I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. You meant every word. Don't lie now. You both wanted me gone, but it will be you who leaves. Tears pricked at Sophie's eyes. Lily sat rigid, jaw tight, fury burning across her face. You have 1 week, I said finally. Pack your things. Find somewhere else to laugh, somewhere else to sneer. This house is no longer yours to stain. I stood, gathering the documents calmly back into the envelope, and returned them to the shoebox. Then I carried it upstairs, leaving the silence behind me. In my room, I placed the shoebox back on the dresser, front and center. No more hiding. For the first time in years, I felt tall. Downstairs, muffled voices rose, angry, desperate, panicked. But none of it touched me. The decision was made. The house was mine again, and soon they would be gone. The week passed like a clock winding down, every tick pulling Sophie and Lily closer to the edge they refused to see. At first, they scoffed. Lily stormed around, slamming doors, muttering, "Crazy old hag," under her breath. Sophie tried reasoning, tried sighing, tried pretending it was all a bluff. But I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply waited. By the 5th day, their whispers in the kitchen grew frantic. I could hear them late at night, Sophie's voice trembling, Lily's sharp with panic. Words like rent, motel, where will we go floated under my door. On the 7th day, I came downstairs with the shoebox tucked under my arm. The morning light spilled across the dining table, catching on the county seal of the envelope I placed in the center. Time's up, I said simply. Sophie froze mid-sip of her coffee. Lily dropped her phone onto the couch. You don't mean it, Sophie whispered, her face pale. I do. I sat in the chair, folded my hands. This house is mine. You've both had a week to prepare. Now it's time to leave. Lily shot up from the couch, eyes blazing. You can't just throw us out. We live here too. No, I said calmly, meeting her glare. You stayed here because I allowed it. That allowance is gone." Sophie's voice broke. "Mom, please. We have nowhere to go. I don't have the money right now. Lily's school, her team, this is her home." "No," I said again, steady as stone. "You told me I live here for free. You told me I don't belong. You told me this isn't my house. I've listened long enough. Now you will." Lily's fists balled, her voice rising to a shriek. "You're heartless. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand that nobody wants her around." I didn't move. I didn't shout. I simply looked at her, my silence cutting sharper than any words. "Pack your things," I said. "Today." Sophie rushed forward, hands clasped together, eyes wet. "Mom, we were wrong. We didn't mean it. Please. We need you. I need you." Her tears would have broken me once, but I had Rose's words in my head and Walter's underlined signature in my heart. Strength wasn't how much you carried. Strength was knowing when to set something down. "You needed me when the bills came," I said softly. "When the laundry piled up. When the lights had to stay on. But when I needed respect, you gave me mockery. When I needed kindness, you gave me silence." Sophie sank to her knees beside the table, clutching my arm. "Don't do this." I pulled my hand free. "I already have." The clock ticked above us, merciless. Lily shoved her phone into her pocket, her face red with fury. "You'll regret this. Who's going to take care of you when you're old and useless?" I stood slowly, each joint stiff but sure. "Not you," I said. "Never you." The silence that followed was louder than her scream. Sophie sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. Lily stormed upstairs, stomping hard enough to rattle the frames on the walls. I waited. An hour later, suitcases appeared by the door. Sophie's hands shook as she zipped them. Lily dragged hers angrily, nearly tearing the lining. When they finally stood on the porch, Sophie turned one last time, her face blotchy with tears. "Mom, are you really going to lock us out?" I met her eyes, steady and cold. "This is my house. You don't belong here anymore." Then I closed the door. The latch clicked into place, final as a gavel. I stood in the quiet hallway, the air suddenly clean. The house seemed to breathe again. Walls lighter, floors steadier, the silence not empty, but full. I walked to the couch, lowered myself into the cushions, and let out a long breath. The same couch I had been forbidden to touch. I pressed my hands into the fabric, claiming it at last. Through the window, I could see them standing on the porch, small against the street, clutching their suitcases. The rain began, soft at first, then steady, drenching them as they argued, pleaded, shouted. But their voices were muffled now, no longer reaching me. I leaned back, folded my hands, and whispered to the photograph of Walter on the wall. "It's done." And for the first time in years, I felt free. The storm outside didn't let up. Rain hammered the roof, slid in rivers down the porch steps, and plastered Sophie's hair flat against her face. Lily stood beside her, arms crossed, hoodie clinging, fury simmering like wet fire. Their suitcases sat on the ground, wheels splashing in puddles. I watched them from the living room window, the same window I had stared out of countless nights, while they laughed in the other room, ignoring me. How many times had I wished for silence? Now I had it. Sophie pounded on the door once, twice. "Mom, please, just let us stay the night. Just tonight. We'll figure something out tomorrow." I stayed on the couch, the same couch I had been forbidden to sit on. My hands rested calmly on the armrest, my body sinking into the cushions like it was claiming me back. Lily's voice cracked through the storm, sharp and bitter. She doesn't care. She never cared. She'd rather die alone in this dusty old house than have us here. I stood slowly, walking to the door, but I didn't open it. Instead, I called through the wood, my voice steady. You told me I was useless. You told me I didn't belong. You told me this wasn't my house. But it is. It always was. And now it will be mine in silence, without your poison. I heard Sophie sob, a raw, broken sound. Lily cursed, kicked at the door, her rage muffled by the storm. You can't do this, she screamed. We're family. I pressed my palm flat against the door. Family doesn't chain you with cruelty. Family doesn't laugh while you break your back to keep the lights on. Family doesn't call you grease or hag or free when you've paid with your whole life. You stopped being family the moment you decided I was nothing. The storm swallowed their protests. After a while, the pounding stopped. I saw them through the window again, dragging the suitcases down the street, shoulders hunched against the rain, two figures shrinking into the dark. When the sound of their footsteps faded, I locked the deadbolt and turned back to the house. My house. The quiet was almost holy. The kitchen smelled of lemon soap, not air freshener. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where their voices had been. For the first time in years, the walls didn't feel like they were pressing in on me. They were opening, wide and free. I walked room to room, slowly. The dining table, scarred from years of meals and arguments, stood proud again. Walter's photograph on the wall seemed to smile brighter. In the hallway mirror, my reflection didn't look like a guest anymore. It looked like a woman who had taken back her life. When I returned to the couch, I sat down deliberately, leaning back until the cushions embraced me. The rain softened outside, a steady rhythm like applause. I thought of Rose's words at KFC. Strength isn't how much you carry, it's knowing when to stop. I had stopped carrying their cruelty, their mockery, their weight. I had set it down, and in doing so, I had lifted myself. I looked at Walter's photograph, raised my glass of water toward it, and whispered, "We built this together." And I kept it. For us. Then I turned my gaze forward, not at the past, not at the pain, but at the silence I had earned. Because respect isn't asked for. It isn't begged. It's taken back. And if you've been treated like a guest in your own life, remember this: don't wait for permission. Take it back.